Narrator's voice. So, are you ready for the lesson? Are you ready to understand what it really means to never give up? If you are, then stick with me, because the answer is just around the corner. You're about to uncover the truth behind this farmer's ultimate lesson. Trust me, it's worth it. The camera cuts to black, the screen flashing with the words "Never give up" in bold, dramatic letters. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting long, shadowy streaks across the fields, and yet, here he was, the farmer, working tirelessly on land that, for the past few months, had refused to cooperate. You could see it in the way he moved, his every step filled with hesitation, as if each footfall might be the one that set everything to crumble beneath him. His hands, weathered and worn from years of labor, gripped the shovel tightly, digging into the dry earth with a force that seemed almost desperate. His eyes, though, told a different story. They were sharp, focused, calculating, as if his mind were playing out a series of possible outcomes, none of which seemed particularly hopeful. The wind, once a gentle caress, had now turned colder, harsher, as if nature itself was sending him a warning. The storms had come and gone, leaving nothing but damage in their wake. Yet, it wasn't the storms themselves that had left him troubled. No, it was the silence that followed them. The kind of silence that settles in your bones and makes you question everything you thought you knew. You see, just a few weeks ago, this field was alive. It was a vibrant stretch of land, full of promise. It had always been that way, even when things got tough. But now, it felt different. Something wasn't right. He paused for a moment, wiping his brow with the back of his sleeve. The sweat was a familiar companion, but it didn't offer any comfort today. For months, he'd been working alone. Sure, the neighbors occasionally stopped by, a quick check, a few words exchanged, the typical pleasantries. But the help he used to rely on had disappeared, almost without a trace. His brother, whom he had shared the farm with for years, had left to pursue a different life. At first, it was understandable. The farm was never easy, and the constant pressure was enough to break anyone who wasn't built for it. But as the weeks went by, and the phone calls became fewer and fewer, the tension grew. Was there something more to his brother's departure? Something he wasn't being told? The idea gnawed at him, but he brushed it aside. After all, life went on. There were bills to pay, crops to grow, and the harvest that was now a distant dream. But the unsettling feeling, the one that had settled in the pit of his stomach, refused to fade. His relationship with his brother had been more than just a business partnership. It had been built on years of shared experiences. The late nights under the stars, talking about their dreams. The long days spent working side by side, knowing there was no one else in the world who understood the way they did. When his brother left, he didn't just lose a business partner, he lost a piece of himself. And that, more than anything, was what had unsettled him. He couldn't shake the feeling that his brother's departure wasn't as innocent as it seemed. As if that wasn't enough, there were the whispers. You know the kind. The ones that float through small towns, carried by the wind, carried by people who have nothing better to do than speculate. Some said his brother had found a new opportunity, maybe a bigger farm somewhere else. Others, however, whispered something darker. They spoke of debts, of risky business deals, of things that didn't sit right. But the farmer, stubborn as ever, dismissed these as rumors. He had his own work to focus on, after all. Still, the timing was strange. His brother had left just as the storms hit. And not just any storms, these were storms of a different magnitude. The kind of storms that devastated crops, tore down fences, and left a lasting mark on the land. The kind that had caused more than a few farmers to pack up and move away, abandoning their fields and their livelihoods. The kind of storms that made people question whether the universe had it out for them. It was in the aftermath of those storms that everything began to unravel. The land, once abundant and full of promise, had become a battlefield not just for survival, but for understanding what was happening beneath the surface. And then there were the bills. They had come in, one after another, each more pressing than the last. The debts, the loans, the expenses all piling up, suffocating him like a weight he couldn't shake. He'd never been in a position like this before. He had always been able to rely on his brother for help, but now, he was on his own. Each morning, as he walked through the fields, He could feel the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him, growing heavier with every step. The idea of asking for help, of reaching out to anyone, felt foreign to him. This farm was his legacy, his life's work. He couldn't risk losing it, not after everything. But what if the problem wasn't just the storms or the debts? What if the very ground beneath him was somehow conspiring against him? What if it was something deeper, something more sinister? These thoughts crept into his mind late at night, just as he was about to drift off to sleep. He had always believed in the land, in its power to heal, to provide. But now, it seemed as though the land itself had turned its back on him. And the worst part? He couldn't figure out why. Was it the soil? Was it a sign of something more? He didn't know, and that uncertainty gnawed at him, slowly eating away at his resolve. But as much as the mystery haunted him, there was something else, something even more unsettling. There was a figure, always on the periphery of his thoughts, someone who seemed to appear at just the right moment, but never when you were looking for them. A neighbor, maybe, or someone from the past. A person who would show up when things were at their worst and offer vague advice that never quite made sense. The farmer had always brushed it off, but lately, those encounters felt off. There was something in the way they spoke, the way they lingered just a little too long, that made his skin crawl. Were they trying to help him? Or were they watching him, waiting for something? The farmer didn't know, but it was starting to feel like he wasn't alone on this farm anymore, not in the way he had always been. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating, and as the days passed, the land seemed to whisper its secrets in the wind, secrets that the farmer was desperate to uncover. Each passing day, he worked harder, tried harder, and hoped harder, but the answers remained elusive. His connection to the earth, once so strong, now felt like it was slipping away, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was pulling the strings from the shadows. And just when he thought he might lose everything, the unexpected happened. The phone rang late one night, the shrill sound cutting through the stillness of the house. He picked it up, his heart racing, his mind already running through 1,000 possibilities. But the voice on the other end was nothing like he expected. The phone call ended as quickly as it began, leaving him in the dark, alone with his thoughts and a new, unshakable fear that the real battle was only just beginning. And now, as the farmer stares out over the land once more, he knows one thing for sure: this journey is far from over. What he's about to uncover will shake him to his core. But will he be ready to face the truth, or will he crumble under the weight of the mystery that's closing in on him from every side? The storm is coming. The question is, who will survive it? The following morning, the farmer awoke to the familiar sound of the wind rustling through the trees outside, but today, there was something off about it. The air felt heavier, the world around him seemed quieter, as though holding its breath, waiting for something. His mind was still buzzing from the strange phone call the night before, and the unease that had settled in his gut was only growing stronger. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the edge of something huge, something that could change everything if only he could figure out what was going on. Determined to push forward, he returned to the field. The soil, once so full of life, seemed to mock him now, dry, cracked, unyielding. But there was still work to be done. He needed answers, and he wasn't going to stop digging until he had them. There was a part of him, buried deep down, that was convinced his brother's disappearance wasn't just about a better opportunity elsewhere. And there was more, something about the way his brother had talked before he left, the cryptic remarks, the hints of trouble that he tried to bury under promises of a fresh start. Those words, now echoing in his mind, seemed to matter more with each passing day. As he walked across the fields, he caught sight of something unusual near the old barn, something that hadn't been there the day before. A weathered crate, half hidden behind some broken boards. The sight of it made his heart skip a beat. He hadn't seen that crate in years. It had been something his father had left behind, full of old tools and farming equipment that had long been replaced by newer, more efficient gear. But there was something different about it now, something that made him feel like it was a piece of a puzzle that he had almost forgotten existed. He moved closer, his curiosity piqued. As he opened the crate, dust rising from the forgotten items inside, his eyes fell on something buried beneath the old tools, a thick, leather-bound journal. His heart raced. It was his father's handwriting, unmistakable, bold, and clear. The journal had always been a source of mystery in their family. No one had ever spoken much about it, but there were rumors. Rumors that his father had kept secrets, that the farm's past was far darker than anyone knew. The farmer had always assumed the journal was filled with nothing more than old farming notes, lists, and records. But now, holding it in his hands, it felt like the key to something much deeper. Just as he was about to open it, he heard a noise from behind, a footstep, the creak of the barn door. He spun around, his heart in his throat. Standing in the doorway was a figure he hadn't expected to see. A neighbor, someone he had known for years, but whose recent behavior had begun to raise questions. They were always polite, always offering to help with odd jobs around the farm, but something about them had felt off recently. Their words always seemed just a little too carefully chosen, their smile just a little too forced. The farmer hadn't thought much of it before, but now, in the silence of the barn, he could feel the tension in the air. "Morning," the neighbor said, their voice too casual for the moment. "I see you're doing some digging today. Hope everything's okay?" The farmer stood up quickly, hiding the journal behind his back. "Yeah, just some old stuff. You know how it is." The neighbor nodded, stepping forward with a slight smile. "I know exactly how it is. Sometimes, it's better to leave the past where it is. You're not going to find anything back there that'll help you now, not with everything that's going on." The words sent a chill down the farmer's spine. There it was again, that feeling, that sense that this wasn't just a casual conversation. The neighbor was talking like they knew something, like they had some insight into the very thing the farmer had been trying to uncover. But how could they know? He hadn't shared anything with them, hadn't told anyone about his suspicions or his search for the truth. The farmer felt his grip tighten on the journal, his instincts screaming at him that something wasn't right. "I'm just trying to understand what happened," the farmer said, his voice steady but edged with frustration. "My brother left, and I've got bills piling up. I need to know what's going on. What happened here?" The neighbor's smile faltered for a moment, and the air between them grew thick with unspoken words. "Some things are better left alone," the neighbor said, their tone shifting, becoming colder. "Trust me. There are things you don't want to uncover. You might think you're digging for answers, but you could end up burying yourself in the process." The warning hung in the air, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The farmer's mind was racing. What was the neighbor trying to tell him? What did they know that he didn't? There was a shift in the air, something unspoken, and for the first time, the farmer realized just how deep this mystery really went. It wasn't just about his brother, or the debts, or the farm. There was something bigger here, something dark and hidden, and he was dangerously close to uncovering it. But just as the tension between them reached its peak, the neighbor turned and walked away without another word, leaving the farmer standing in the barn, the journal still clutched tightly in his hands. He could feel the weight of the warning hanging over him, but it wasn't enough to make him stop. If anything, it only fueled his determination. He wasn't going to let fear keep him from the truth. Not now. Still, as he stood there, staring at the journal, something else gnawed at him, a memory, a flash of something from the past. It was a conversation he had overheard years ago, one that had seemed trivial at the time but now, in the light of everything that was happening, seemed far more significant. His father, his brother, the farm, it all felt like a carefully constructed lie, and the more he thought about it, the more it all seemed to point to one thing: betrayal. It wasn't just his brother who had disappeared. No, there was something darker, something more insidious at play. And as the farmer stared at the journal, the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. The journal didn't just contain his father's notes, it held the secrets of a past betrayal, a decision that had torn the family apart. A decision that had been kept hidden for years, and one that, if uncovered, could destroy everything the farmer had worked for. The journal, the mysterious neighbor, the strange phone call, they were all connected. But the farmer had no idea how, and as he turned to leave the barn, the journal still tightly gripped in his hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. Someone who didn't want him to uncover the truth. And as the door slammed behind him, he realized just how deep the web of lies and betrayal went. But was he too late to stop it? And who could he really trust now? Not the Jenna he had known, but the one from before, the original. The one whose eyes held 1,000 secrets. She looked at him with a mix of sadness and something far more dangerous, something that made his pulse quicken. "You think it's over," she said softly, her voice steady, almost familiar, yet utterly foreign. "You've only just begun." And in that moment, Alex understood. This wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. The choices, the truths, the lies, they were still unfolding. The system was still out there, still in motion, and he was once again at its center. He didn't know what came next. He didn't know if he was free or still trapped in some twisted game. But one thing was clear, he wasn't the same person who had entered this story. And maybe that was enough. For now. The screen flickered, and the image of Jenna, the final mystery, lingered for a moment longer before it cut to black. The story had only just begun. And so had Alex. The more he thought about it, the more the unease inside him deepened. Something was wrong. It wasn't just the mystery of his brother's disappearance or the cryptic messages he was receiving. No, this felt different. There was a danger here, one that wasn't just about secrets, but something more, sinister. As he paced the floor of the farmhouse, the house suddenly felt smaller, as if the very walls were closing in on him. He thought he saw shadows moving in the corners of the room, glimpses of shapes that weren't there when he first turned his head. The paranoia began to creep in, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the farmer was truly afraid. His instincts, the ones he had honed through years of working on this land, were screaming at him. Someone was watching him. Someone was waiting for him to make a mistake. It was nearly midnight when the first sign of something was wrong came. He had just finished a late meal, the warmth of the food still lingering in his stomach, when a loud bang echoed through the night. It was the sound of something heavy hitting the side of the farmhouse, like a rock or a brick thrown with purpose. He froze, heart pounding in his chest, ears straining to catch any other noise. The house was silent again, save for the wind and the distant creaking of the floorboards. His first instinct was to dismiss it, probably an animal, something harmless. But deep down, he knew better. The sound had been too deliberate, too close. The farmer grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and stepped outside, the cool night air biting at his skin as he scanned the yard. His gaze flickered over the barn, the dark shapes of the old farming equipment casting long shadows in the weak light. Nothing. No movement, no sign of life. But something didn't feel right. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he slowly made his way toward the barn, each step weighed down by the unease that had settled deep in his bones. The silence around him felt suffocating, as though the world was holding its breath. Then, just as he reached the barn, a rustling sound behind him made him whip around, his heart leaping into his throat. There, standing at the edge of the yard, was a figure. The dim light from the farmhouse barely illuminated the person, but he could tell they were tall, wearing a dark jacket that blended into the shadows. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. They just stood there, staring at him. It wasn't until the figure stepped forward into the beam of the flashlight that he saw the face, or rather, the lack of it. The figure was wearing a dark mask, one that covered everything but their eyes, which gleamed with an eerie, unnatural intensity. The farmer's breath caught in his throat as his pulse began to race. Without a word, the figure turned and quickly disappeared into the darkness. The farmer stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, his heart pounding in his chest. He tried to tell himself it was a prank, some sick joke someone was playing on him. But the weight of the figure's gaze, the chilling silence, told him this was far from a joke. Someone was out there, someone who had been watching him, and now, they were getting closer. The farmer didn't hesitate. He bolted toward the house, his legs carrying him faster than he ever thought possible, slamming the door behind him as he entered. His mind was spinning, desperately trying to process what had just happened. Who was that person? And why did they come here? Was it connected to the warnings from Marie, to the mysterious phone calls he had been receiving? He had no answers, only more questions, and with each passing minute, the fear in his chest was growing heavier. As he paced the floor of the farmhouse, his eyes flicked toward the window. Outside, the world seemed eerily still, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, waiting. He felt trapped, caught in a nightmare that he couldn't escape, and the more he tried to piece everything together, the more elusive the truth became. The next morning, he made his way to the barn again, hoping to make sense of the strange events that had unfolded. But when he reached the barn door, he stopped dead in his tracks. Something was wrong. The door was slightly ajar, something he was certain he hadn't done the night before. His pulse quickened as he pushed the door open slowly, the creaking sound of the hinges almost deafening in the stillness of the morning. As he stepped inside, his eyes were drawn to the ground, where he saw something that made his stomach drop, a boot print in the dirt. Fresh. The imprint was deep, as though someone had been standing there not long ago. The barn was empty, but that one print told him everything he needed to know. Someone had been here, someone had been inside his barn, and they were leaving clues for him to find. But why? What was the purpose of all this? He could feel the weight of the journal in his pocket, a constant reminder that there were still answers to be found. But now, more than ever, the stakes felt higher. Someone was playing a dangerous game, and the farmer was right in the middle of it. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. He pulled it from his pocket, his heart skipping a beat as he saw the notification. It was from an unknown number, and the message was brief, but its meaning was unmistakable. Stop digging. Leave the past buried. Or you'll be next. The words sent a cold shiver down his spine. The farmer's hands trembled as he gripped the phone tighter, his mind racing to comprehend what he had just read. This wasn't just a warning. This was a threat. A direct threat, one that made it clear there were people who would do whatever it took to keep the truth buried, and that he was now a target. The walls were closing in, and there was nowhere to run. The deeper he dug, the more dangerous this all became. And with every step forward, the risk grew higher, the cost more severe. The phone buzzed again, another message, this one even more chilling. You don't know who you're dealing with. We know where you are. His breath caught in his throat as his pulse hammered in his ears. This wasn't a game anymore. This was real. And whatever had been buried on this farm, whatever secrets it held, were more dangerous than he ever could have imagined. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He wasn't just digging for answers anymore, he was fighting for his life. And the people behind these threats were getting closer, ready to do whatever it took to stop him from uncovering the truth. The farmer stepped back, his hands slick with sweat, his mind reeling from the urgency of the situation. His thoughts spiraled, fear and confusion clouding his judgment. Who could he trust now? Was Marie's warning a plea for him to stop, or had she been part of this all along? Was she hiding something, just like everyone else seemed to be? The questions piled up, but answers felt farther away than ever. One thing was clear, the danger wasn't just a possibility anymore. It was here. And it was closing in fast. The day after the cryptic text messages and the chilling encounter in the barn, the farmer was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. His mind felt like a maze, each path leading to more confusion, more uncertainty. The messages, the shadowy figure in the yard, and even Marie's cryptic warning all swirled together, creating a whirlwind of fear and suspicion that he couldn't escape. But as the sun set that evening, casting long shadows across the farm, something shifted. The air was thick with tension, as though the land itself was holding its breath. The storm that had been brewing for days now seemed inevitable. The only question left was whether he would survive the storm when it finally hit. With each passing minute, the farmer found himself grappling with a deeper sense of unease, the sense that he was being pulled in too many directions at once. Was he being played? Or was there something larger at work, something so deeply entwined with his family's history that it had become impossible to see? The journal, the old records, the strange clues, all seemed to point in different directions, and every time he thought he was close to an answer, the pieces slipped away like sand through his fingers. It wasn't until late in the evening, just as he was about to give up on the idea of finding anything new, that the breakthrough came. He had gone through the journal again, page by page, looking for any detail he might have missed before. And then, as he flipped to the last few pages, the ones he had passed over several times, his heart stopped. There it was, hidden in the margins, scrawled in a hand that was not his brother's, not his father's, and certainly not Marie's. It was a message, a note that made no sense at first, but as the farmer's eyes moved over the words, a cold realization settled over him. The note read, "The truth you seek is not where you think it is. The farm holds more than just its land. They'll stop at nothing to keep it from you." For a moment, the words didn't register. His eyes scanned them again, searching for any sign of meaning, but the feeling that something was off grew stronger with each passing second. The truth, was it really buried here on the farm, as he had always assumed? Or was it something else entirely? The more he thought about it, the more a dark thought crept into his mind. What if everything he believed about his family's legacy, about the land, was a lie? What if the very thing he was digging for was not the truth at all, but something far more dangerous? He slammed the journal shut, his thoughts racing. There was a sound from the back of the house, faint but unmistakable, a door opening, footsteps in the hallway. His heart lurched. It was too late for visitors, too late for anything normal. It was too quiet for someone to be here without him knowing. He grabbed the flashlight again and crept toward the door, trying to control the shaking in his hands. The footsteps were closer now, and the air seemed to grow colder with each step. Then, as the door to the hallway creaked open, the last person he expected to see stepped into the dim light of the farmhouse. It was Marie. "Marie," he said, his voice hoarse, trying to mask the shock and confusion in his words. "What are you doing here?" She stepped inside, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, as though weighing whether or not to say something. It was as if the air had thickened between them, as though something was about to break open. And then, without warning, she spoke, her voice shaking. "It's not what you think," she said, her eyes darting nervously around the room, as though checking for eavesdroppers. "You need to stop. You need to stop digging. You're in too deep now, and it's too late." The farmer's mind was racing. He wasn't prepared for this. Everything about this encounter felt wrong, out of place. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice rising. "I don't understand. Why are you acting like this? What's going on?" Marie took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she wiped them on her pants. "You don't understand because no one ever told you the truth. You've been living a lie, just like the rest of us." His words hit him like a hammer, knocking the breath out of him. A lie. What was she talking about? His head spun as he tried to make sense of it all. "What do you mean?" he repeated, now desperate for answers. She took a step toward him, her eyes locking with his, and for the first time, he saw the weight of something dark and heavy in them. The farm, it's not just land. It's not just some patch of earth that's been passed down through the generations. It's a place of power, of something older, something more dangerous. Your father knew this. Your brother knew this. And now you're getting too close. The farmer stepped back, his mind racing. Power. Dangerous. None of this made any sense. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "What is this place really about?" Marie's face twisted in fear as she looked over her shoulder, as though checking to make sure no one else was listening. "You're not the first one to try to uncover it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Others have come before you, and they've vanished. People who were close to the truth. People who dug too deep." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "I didn't want to tell you this, but you have to know. Your brother, he didn't just disappear. He was taken. And so were the others. They didn't just walk away, they were pulled in. By something. Something that's connected to the land, to the farm. It's been here for generations, hiding in plain sight. And now, it's after you." The farmer stood frozen, unable to process what she had just said. His brother, taken? People who had tried to uncover the truth, gone without a trace. His mind was racing. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words caught in his throat. How could this be possible? How could the land, the farm, hold so much power? What kind of power were they talking about? Marie looked at him, her face filled with regret and fear. "You have to leave," she said urgently. "You have to leave now before it's too late. If you stay here, if you keep going, you'll be just like them." Before the farmer could respond, a loud noise broke the silence, a sharp, cracking sound coming from the barn. His heart raced as he turned toward the window, his mind snapping into focus. Something was happening out there, something that could change everything. The storm was no longer just a metaphor. It was coming. And he was in the middle of it. Marie was already backing away, her eyes darting toward the door. "I warned you," she said one last time, her voice filled with sorrow. I tried to warn you." And then, without another word, she turned and fled into the night. The farmer stood there, his heart pounding in his chest, his thoughts in chaos. The truth, it seemed, was more terrifying than he had ever imagined. And as he turned to look out into the darkening landscape of the farm, he realized that whatever was buried here, whatever had been hidden for so long, was something far beyond his understanding. The past had always been a shadow over the farm, but now it was alive, and it was reaching out for him. The next morning, the weight of the previous night's revelations settled heavily on the farmer's shoulders. His mind was in turmoil, his thoughts tangled in the web of secrets and warnings that had surrounded him for what felt like an eternity. Marie's cryptic words still echoed in his ears, her fear and desperation clear in her voice as she spoke of the farm's dark history, of people disappearing, of an ancient power tied to the land. But the more he thought about it, the less he could make sense of it. Why would she warn him, and yet, still leave? If she knew so much, why didn't she help him? It wasn't his brother, it wasn't a neighbor, it was someone else entirely. Someone who knew far too much about his situation, and had far too many questions of their own. The line went quiet for a moment, and then the words came, cold and chilling, "You're not alone in this, you know. But maybe, just maybe, you'll want to be careful who you trust from here on out. And who else, if anyone, was in on this terrible secret?" The questions gnawed at him, and he knew, deep down, that there was only one way to find answers. He had to confront the people closest to him, the ones who might hold the key to everything. But as the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, casting long shadows across the farm, the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. These people, the ones he trusted, might not be who they appeared to be. It was after dinner when he finally made the decision. His father had been quiet all evening, his stoic face barely betraying a flicker of emotion as he ate. The farmer had always admired his father's unwavering resolve, the calm demeanor that had held the family together through countless hardships. But tonight, the older man seemed distant, as though something was weighing on him. And as the farmer looked across the table at his father, he suddenly wondered how much of what he had known about the man was true. Had his father known all along about the farm's dark history? Was he complicit in whatever had happened to his brother? The thought was unbearable, but the more he turned it over in his mind, the more he realized that he had no choice but to ask. There was no other way forward. He had to confront his father, even if it meant facing the terrifying possibility that everything he had believed was a lie. He cleared his throat, the words tasting bitter as they left his mouth. "Dad," he said, his voice steady but his heart racing. "I need to know the truth. About the farm, about everything. About what happened to my brother. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending like I don't know something's wrong." His father's eyes flicked up from his plate, meeting the farmer's gaze for the first time that evening. There was a moment of silence, thick and oppressive, before his father slowly set his fork down, his weathered hands trembling slightly. The farmer could see the internal struggle on his father's face, the conflict between love and guilt, between protecting his son and hiding the truth. For a long moment, neither spoke, the weight of the question hanging in the air, suffocating. And then, in a voice that was softer than the farmer had ever heard it, his father finally spoke. "You don't understand, son," his father began, his voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted you to know. I never wanted you to get tangled up in all this." His father's eyes darkened as he spoke, his shoulders slumping with the weight of years of secrets. "This farm, it's not just a piece of land. It's been a part of our family for generations, yes, but it's also a curse. A curse we've all tried to run from, in one way or another." The farmer's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean? A curse? What happened to my brother, Dad? What's going on here?" His father stood up suddenly, pushing his chair back with such force that it scraped against the wooden floor, the sound sharp in the quiet of the room. He paced to the window, looking out into the darkness, as if searching for the right words. His back was to the farmer, and for a moment, the room felt cold, distant. "Your brother, he didn't just vanish," his father muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "He got too close to the truth. And they took him. Just like they took the others before him." The farmer's heart pounded in his chest, the world around him blurring for a moment as the weight of his father's words sank in. Took him? Who was they? The thought of his brother, of his family being ripped apart by some unseen force, twisted his gut into knots. Who? Who took him, Dad? What are you hiding? His father turned slowly, his face pale and weary. There are things about this farm that no one should ever know, things we've kept buried for generations. But now it's too late for that. You're already involved, and you don't even know the half of it. The tension in the room was palpable, the air thick with unspoken truths. The farmer could feel his pulse hammering in his ears, the anger and confusion building inside him like a storm waiting to break. His father's voice cracked, and he looked down, his gaze never meeting his son's. I tried to protect you from it. I tried to shield you, just like I shielded your mother before he trailed off, as if unwilling to finish the thought. The farmer's mind raced. His mother, another piece of the puzzle he had never been able to solve. He had never known much about her death, only that it had been sudden, unexplained. Was this connected to whatever had happened to his brother? The pieces were slipping together, but the picture was still unclear, shrouded in shadows. Dad, you have to tell me everything, the farmer demanded, his voice shaking with desperation. What's really going on here? You can't keep hiding this from me. His father's eyes hardened, the sorrow in them replaced by something darker, something colder. You think you want the truth? His father's voice grew louder now, the years of pain and guilt pouring out. You think you're ready to face what's been hidden here? What we've been running from? If you want the truth, then you're going to have to make a choice. A choice between your safety and the truth. The farmer's chest tightened as the words hit him like a physical blow. What did that mean? What choice was he supposed to make? How could he choose between knowing the truth and staying alive? But even as the words hung in the air, he knew deep down that he was already too far gone. He had already made that choice the moment he began digging into the past, the moment he uncovered the first clue about the land's dark history. Don't you see, son, his father said, his voice softening, as though trying to reach him, to make him understand. It's too dangerous. There are people out there who will do anything to protect this secret. They will stop at nothing to keep it buried. And now, they're watching you. They know what you're doing. A chill ran down the farmer's spine. The same people who had been behind the messages, the threats, the shadowy figure he had seen in the yard. His mind was spinning, and the weight of the decision before him felt unbearable. Was it really worth it to keep pushing, to keep digging, to risk everything just for the sake of some hidden truth? Or should he turn away, let it all go, and walk away from the nightmare that had become his life? The farmer took a deep breath, his heart racing, and as his father's words lingered in the air, he realized the true horror of his situation. There were no easy answers. There was no way to simply walk away from the choices he had already made. He had already stepped too far into the darkness, and now, there was no turning back. You don't have much time, his father said, his voice breaking the silence. The longer you stay, the more dangerous it becomes. You have to decide, now. The farmer felt his stomach drop. The ultimatum was clear: stay in the shadows, live with the unknown, or risk it all in search of the truth. But what if the truth was something far worse than he could imagine? What if, in the end, the cost of knowing the truth was more than he could bear? The room fell silent again, the weight of the decision hanging over them like a thick fog. The farmer stood frozen, the storm of emotions inside him warring with the fear of what might come next. The only thing he knew for certain was this: the truth was out there, waiting for him, but so was the danger, and it was closing in fast. The farmer's breath was shallow as he stared at his father, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. Every word that had passed his father's lips seemed to twist the knife deeper into the chaos of his life. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of a reality he had never asked for, never expected. His father's warning, "You have to make a choice," was haunting him. But it was more than just a choice between safety and the truth now. This was about survival. And not just his own. That night, the tension in the house had thickened to a point where the air felt suffocating. The walls of the farmhouse, once comforting and familiar, now seemed oppressive, trapping him inside a nightmare with no clear way out. The wind outside had picked up, howling through the trees like an ominous prelude to a storm. The light flickering in the kitchen from the overhead lamp cast long shadows on the walls, making it seem like there were eyes watching him from every corner. He couldn't escape the feeling that everything around him was closing in. His entire world was slowly crumbling beneath his feet. And it was at that moment, just as the weight of everything started to fully settle, that the first real blow came. The sudden, sharp sound of tires crunching on gravel outside jerked him out of his thoughts. His head whipped toward the window, and his heart skipped a beat. He knew that sound. It was the unmistakable noise of a car pulling into the driveway. But this wasn't a time for visitors. This wasn't just another neighbor or friend stopping by to catch up. His gut clenched as the possibility dawned on him. They were here. The door to the house opened abruptly, and there, standing in the doorway, was someone the farmer never expected to see. It was Ben, his oldest friend, the one person he had always trusted above all others. The one who had been by his side through thick and thin, from school days to late-night talks about the future. The man who had always had his back. But now, as Ben's gaze met his, something in the way he stood there, something in the tense, guarded expression on his face, told the farmer that everything had changed. "I knew it," the farmer said, his voice barely above a whisper. The shock was overwhelming, but the pieces were coming together now, painfully so. Ben had been acting strangely for weeks. The odd texts, the strange silences when he'd asked about the past, the way he'd brushed off the farmer's concerns about the farm. He had been hiding something. Ben's jaw tightened, and without a word, he stepped inside, shutting the door behind him with a sense of finality. The farmer's heart thudded in his chest, and he took an instinctive step backward, his mind swirling with possibilities. "What's going on, Ben?" the farmer asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "What aren't you telling me?" Ben's gaze flickered, and for a moment, the farmer thought he saw a flash of guilt, quickly masked by a steely resolve. "You don't get it, do you?" Ben said, his voice low and tense. "You never did." The words hung in the air, and the farmer felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean by that?" His voice cracked with the pressure of the moment. "What the hell is happening here, Ben? Is there something going on with the farm? With everything?" Ben stepped forward, his eyes darkened with an intensity the farmer had never seen before. "There's a lot you don't know. A lot you're not supposed to know." He paused, looking away for a moment, then turned back to face the farmer, his expression hardening. "I didn't want this to happen. I didn't want you to get dragged into this, but you're too deep now. Too far gone." A chill ran down the farmer's spine. "Dragged into what? What the hell are you talking about?" The pieces were tumbling into place now, but they didn't make any sense. Ben, the guy who had been his closest ally, was now talking like an enemy. Like someone who was hiding something, or worse, someone who had been complicit in everything. Ben didn't speak for a moment, his lips pressed tight as though wrestling with a decision. Finally, he exhaled sharply, the sound more like a reluctant confession than a breath. "I'm not the one you should be asking about the farm. You should be asking them. The ones behind all of this. The ones who've been controlling everything for years. It's bigger than just you. It's bigger than this farm. And he hesitated, the words seemingly heavy on his tongue. I've been working with them, keeping the secret, keeping you in the dark." His voice trembled as if the weight of the truth was finally breaking through. The room felt colder, the space between them thick with the weight of the betrayal. "What?" The farmer's voice was hoarse now, the reality of it sinking in. "You've been working with them this whole time?" Ben's face twisted in agony, and he looked away, unable to meet the farmer's gaze. "I didn't have a choice. They have too much on me. On all of us. You think you've been chasing a ghost, but the truth is, the people controlling this farm, controlling your family, have been watching us for years. It's not just a land deal or some old family secret. It's a conspiracy. A machine that's been running long before we were born." The weight of the words hit like a sledgehammer. Farmer stumbled backward, his head spinning. How could this be happening? Ben, his lifelong friend, the one person he had trusted with his life, had been working against him all along. Had he been part of his brother's disappearance too? Had he known what happened to their family all along, while pretending to help? "I didn't want it to go this far, but you've pushed them into a corner," Ben said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Now they're coming for you. You need to leave. I'm telling you, they'll do whatever it takes to stop you. They won't let anyone get too close to the truth. The farmer stood frozen, the ground beneath him feeling like it was slipping away. The truth was no longer just a matter of family history or a hidden past. This was a conspiracy, something vast and ruthless, with far more at stake than he had ever realized. It was like everything he thought he knew had been turned on its head. The farm, his family, his closest ally, all of it had been part of something far darker. A harsh knock at the door echoed through the house, making the farmer's heart leap into his throat. Ben's eyes widened in panic, and he grabbed the farmer's arm, pulling him toward the back door. "They're here," he hissed. "You need to go. Now. If you stay, you won't make it out alive." But the farmer didn't move. Something inside him snapped. He wasn't going to run. Not now. Not when the truth was within reach, not when he was this close to exposing everything. He didn't know how much time he had, but he knew one thing for sure: the clock was ticking, and there was no going back. He shook off Ben's grip and stormed toward the front door. "I'll face them myself," he said, his voice thick with resolve. "I'm not running. Not anymore." Ben's face twisted in desperation. "You don't get it. If you go out there, it'll be the last thing you ever do." But the farmer was already stepping into the darkness of the night, the distant knock on the door growing louder, echoing through the cold air like a countdown to a fate he no longer feared. The storm had come, and there was no escaping it now. The farmer's boots hit the cold ground as he stepped outside into the darkness, the night air biting at his skin. Every step he took was met with the distant sound of a growl from the wind, as if the earth itself was warning him to turn back. His heart hammered in his chest, his mind a storm of fury, confusion, and fear. He wasn't sure what he was walking toward anymore, but he couldn't stop. Not now. There were no more lies left to untangle. There was only one thing left to do: face whatever had been lurking in the shadows all this time. The farmhouse loomed behind him like a memory, a place that had once been a sanctuary but now felt like a cage. His fingers trembled as they brushed against the cold metal of the gate, the rusted latch creaking in protest as he threw it open. Beyond the gate, the dark fields stretched out, the towering trees whispering secrets of their own. It was there, somewhere in the vast expanse of land that had been his family's for generations, where everything had gone wrong. It was there that the truth waited, lurking just out of reach. The sound of footsteps behind him brought his mind to a halt. He didn't need to look to know who it was. Ben had followed him, just as he knew he would. But this time, there would be no turning back. This wasn't the same Ben who had once been his ally. This was a man who had already chosen his side, the wrong side. "I told you not to do this." Ben's voice was low, but the tremor of fear in it was unmistakable. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." The farmer didn't turn around. His eyes were fixed on the distant silhouette of the barn, where he knew answers waited. He could feel the weight of Ben's gaze on his back, the pressure of 100 silent warnings that had been too easy to ignore. But now, in the silence of the night, nothing could drown out the truth that was screaming in his head. "I'm done running," the farmer said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "I want the truth. Now." Ben was silent for a long moment, his steps crunching against the gravel as he came closer, but it was clear he wasn't going to stop him. He had no choice but to follow. The farmer could hear his breath, heavy with something like regret, but also determination. This wasn't just about secrets anymore. It was about survival. They reached the barn, the massive doors creaking in protest as they swung open. The stench of old hay and earth filled the air, but it was the strange feeling of wrongness that hit him first. It was as if the very air inside the barn had been charged with something unnatural, something that shouldn't have been there. The barn was eerily still, its dark corners hiding whatever truths had been buried there for so long. The farmer's breath caught in his throat, and his fingers tightened around the handle of the flashlight, its beam cutting through the shadows as he stepped further inside. It was then that he saw it, a small, dusty table in the center of the barn. On it, a stack of old papers lay scattered, a few torn and yellowed with age, others still crisp and sharp. He moved toward it with an urgency he didn't fully understand, his fingers trembling as he flipped through the papers. They were documents, old land deeds, records of ownership, names he recognized from his family's past, dates that stretched back farther than he could remember. But it was the last document, the one at the bottom of the stack, that made his blood run cold. It was a contract. The signature at the bottom was his father's, but it was the name written above it that stopped him in his tracks. Ben Mulligan. His mind reeled. The world around him seemed to tilt as the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Ben wasn't just a friend, a confidant. Ben had been tied to the land in ways the farmer had never imagined. He wasn't here to help. He had been part of the conspiracy all along. And the truth hit like a tidal wave. Ben wasn't just complicit. He was the one who had been orchestrating everything from the shadows. Before he could fully process the enormity of what he had just uncovered, Ben spoke again, his voice cold and detached. "You should have never come here. You should have listened to your father. None of this was supposed to happen." The farmer spun around, his eyes blazing with anger, but there was no fear in his gaze. "Not anymore. You've been lying to me this whole time," he spat. "You're the reason my brother's gone. You're the reason this farm is cursed." Ben took a slow, deliberate step forward, his face hardened by years of deceit. "It's not that simple," he said, his voice almost too calm. "You think you can just tear down everything that's been built over the years? The farm, the power, it's bigger than both of us. And now that you know, there's no going back. You're a threat, and they'll never let you walk away from this." Suddenly, the barn door slammed shut behind them, and the farmer whipped around, his heart racing. There was someone else in the barn now. Shadows moved quickly, and for a split second, he thought he saw multiple figures closing in from every side. His breath caught in his throat as a figure stepped forward from the darkness, a silhouette he didn't recognize at first. Then the person stepped into the light, and the farmer's eyes widened in shock. It was his father. But it wasn't the same man. His face was pale, drawn, and his eyes were vacant, as though he had been drained of life. A sharp chill ran down the farmer's spine as he took a step back. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice trembling. His father's lips curled into a twisted smile. "The truth, son. You wanted the truth." His voice was eerie, distant, like someone who had been lost for far too long. "You think Ben was the mastermind? No. It's been me all along." The words cut through the air like a blade, leaving the farmer standing there, stunned. Everything he thought he knew about his family, about his life, shattered in that instant. His father had been part of this twisted conspiracy from the beginning. He had allowed his son to chase false leads, to dig into a history that had been carefully constructed to deceive him. And now, with that final revelation, it was clear that the farmer had walked straight into a trap. Ben stepped forward again, his voice colder than before. "You should have stayed away. But now it's too late." Before the farmer could respond, his mind raced to piece together the final part of the puzzle. His brother's disappearance, his father's sudden shift in behavior, the strange messages, the land's history, it had all been orchestrated. The conspiracy ran deeper than he could have ever imagined. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the people he had trusted the most were never really on his side. But just as the final pieces clicked into place, everything changed again. A loud crash sounded from behind him, and the farmer turned just in time to see the barn's wooden walls splinter and crack, as if something enormous was forcing its way through. The ground shook beneath him, and before he could make sense of what was happening, the barn doors flew open with a deafening bang. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, imposing, and covered in shadows. It wasn't human. The farmer's breath caught in his throat as the figure took a slow, deliberate step forward, its presence filling the room with an overwhelming sense of dread. It was something ancient. Something that had been lying in wait for generations. And as it stepped into the light, its glowing eyes met his. They were never alone. The final twist was here. And it was more horrifying than anything the farmer had ever imagined. The farmer's heart pounded as the creature in front of him moved closer, its glowing eyes locking onto his with a malevolent intensity. It wasn't just the terror in the air that made his pulse quicken, it was the undeniable weight of everything that had led him here. The mystery, the lies, the twisted family history, it had all built to this moment. And now, standing in front of something so ancient, so inexplicable, it was like all the pain and loss he had endured suddenly clicked into place. His father's empty gaze, Ben's betrayal, the unsettling clues that had once seemed like pieces of a puzzle they couldn't quite solve, they were part of something bigger. Something he hadn't been able to see until now. He was no longer just fighting to uncover the truth. He was fighting to survive. The figure in the doorway, its massive silhouette stretching across the barn, took another step forward, and the air thickened, becoming suffocating. The farmer's mind raced, his thoughts a blur, but the only thing that kept him from falling to his knees in fear was his unyielding drive for justice. The creature wasn't just the culmination of everything wrong, it was a symbol of the very conspiracy that had been pulling the strings from behind the scenes for years. His father's twisted involvement in the land deal, Ben's hidden agenda, they were just pieces of a much larger picture, one that the farmer had barely begun to understand. But in the face of this nightmare, something inside him shifted. He wasn't just the son of a man who had buried the truth. He was the descendant of generations that had stood on this land, and no creature, no secret or betrayal, could take that from him. The memories of his childhood, of running through these fields, of hearing his parents' voices call him in from the harvest, all rushed back to him. His family might have been tainted by darkness, but he was still part of something good. He would fight for that. He stepped forward, his legs trembling with fear but his resolve unshaken. "You can't control me anymore," he said, the words coming out with more power than he had expected. "This farm belongs to me. It always has." His voice echoed in the barn, and for a split second, he saw the creature falter, just a flicker of hesitation in its glowing eyes. It wasn't just the land that had been the object of its grasp. It was his will, the power of choice, the strength to reclaim everything that had been stolen. But just as quickly, the creature lunged forward, its massive, dark form hurtling toward him with terrifying speed. There was no time to react. His instincts kicked in, and he ducked just in time, rolling to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's grasp. The barn splintered as the force of the impact sent beams of wood crashing to the ground. He could feel the heat of its presence behind him, but his body refused to freeze. He wasn't ready to die, not yet. Ben's voice broke through the chaos, sharp and panicked. "You don't understand. It's too late. It's been too late for years." But the farmer couldn't afford to listen anymore. He couldn't afford to waste another second in the tangled web of lies. Instead, he reached out, his hand finding the lantern hanging from the ceiling. With all his might, he swung it in a wide arc, smashing it against the barn floor. The flames erupted in an instant, consuming the hay and wooden beams in a blaze of fire. The creature recoiled, as if the flames had the power to weaken it. The heat and light gave the farmer a moment to think, to act. With a roar, the creature swiped at him, knocking him back into the side of the barn. Pain shot through his ribs, but he pushed through it. This was his chance. The fire was growing, but it was also their only weapon. The creature was vulnerable now. He had to finish it. "Stay back," he shouted at Ben, who had been standing frozen in shock. "This is my fight." Ben took a step back, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. But it was too late for him, too late for anyone to intervene. The creature's screeches filled the barn, its cries of rage and pain mixing with the roar of the fire. The farmer's hands were shaking, but his heart was steady. He had spent so long running from the truth, from his father's past, from Ben's betrayals, and from the land itself. But now, in this final moment, he understood. The truth wasn't something he could uncover with clues or whispers in the dark. It was something he had to fight for. He wasn't just the victim of this twisted legacy. He was the one who would bring it all to an end. With one final, desperate rush, the farmer grabbed the creature by its glowing limbs, pushing it toward the flames. The barn exploded in a cacophony of sound, wood and hay flying in every direction as the creature howled in agony. The fire spread rapidly, its warmth scorching the farmer's skin, but he refused to let go. He felt the weight of everything, the generations before him, the years of suffering, and the years of lies all converging in that moment. The creature's power began to wane, its glow flickering as it succumbed to the fire. And then, with one last unearthly screech, it disintegrated into smoke, its form vanishing into the air like a nightmare fading at dawn. The barn was gone, consumed by the flames. The farmer staggered back, gasping for breath, his body trembling from exhaustion, but his heart was light. The battle was over. The truth had been revealed. The land, the farm, and everything it stood for was his. And yet, as the fire burned out, something remained unsettled in his chest. The creature was gone, but the secrets of the land, his family's past, still lingered in the air, like a shadow that would never fully disappear. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the smoke, the farmer turned to Ben, who was standing at the edge of the field, watching him with a mixture of regret and fear in his eyes. But there was no time for words now. The past couldn't be undone. The betrayal, the conspiracy, it was over. The fire had purged the evil from the land. But the farmer couldn't shake the feeling that something more was waiting. "Are you going to be okay?" Ben asked, his voice hollow. The farmer didn't respond. Instead, he looked out across the charred remains of the barn, the fields stretching out beyond. The air was still heavy with smoke, but in the distance, he could see the first signs of life returning. The crops would grow again. The land would heal. But the shadows would always remain. As the morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the land, the farmer took one last look at the ruins of the barn. He had defeated the creature, but he knew that the fight for the truth, the fight for peace, wasn't over. He could move forward, but there would always be a part of him that would be tied to the mysteries of this land, the unanswered questions that would linger forever. And as the wind began to shift, whispering through the trees, he felt it, the weight of something watching, waiting. The truth might have been revealed, but there were still things in the dark. Things that hadn't yet been brought to light. The farmer took a deep breath, and with that final, lingering thought, he walked away, knowing that he would never truly be free from the land or the secrets it kept. The story might have ended here, but it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The shadows would always be watching. Transform your mindset, transform your life, the hidden truths behind success. Imagine waking up every day with a sense of purpose, clarity, and unstoppable drive. Picture yourself breaking free from the chains of self-doubt, fear, and procrastination that have held you back for years. What if I told you that the key to unlocking this transformation lies within your own mind? In the next few minutes, you're going to discover the secrets that have propelled some of the most successful individuals to greatness. You're not alone in feeling stuck or uncertain. Many have stood where you are now, questioning their potential, doubting their worth, and wondering if change is even possible. But here's the truth: transformation isn't just for the lucky few. It's for anyone willing to challenge their current mindset and embrace the possibility of a new reality. This isn't about quick fixes or empty promises. It's about understanding the profound impact your thoughts have on your life and learning how to harness that power to create lasting change. The journey ahead isn't always easy, but it's worth every step. So, are you ready to embark on this journey? To challenge the beliefs that have limited you and to step into a future filled with possibility? Your transformation begins now. Stay with me, because the best is yet to come. For as long as he could remember, Tyler had always believed that success came from hustle, grinding from dawn until dusk, chasing deadlines, chasing money, chasing people's approval. He was raised in a small Midwest town where hard work was the only currency that mattered, and any talk of mindset or self-belief was dismissed as fluff. His parents didn't have time to talk about dreams or purpose. They were too busy surviving, and they taught him to do the same. But deep inside, even as a kid, Tyler felt like something was off. He watched people around him repeat the same routine every day, pouring everything into jobs they hated, relationships that drained them, and habits that left them empty. And yet, no one questioned it. No one stopped to ask, is this really the only way? Now, years later, Tyler finds himself sitting alone in his overpriced downtown apartment, surrounded by all the symbols of so-called success: designer clothes, a high-end car lease, and a calendar full of meetings, but still feeling completely lost. The question that brought him here keeps ringing in his head like a whisper he can't escape. Is this it? Recently, things have shifted in strange, almost unexplainable ways. It started when Tyler's best friend, Jordan, abruptly cut off contact without any warning. One day, they were sharing ideas and ambitions over coffee. The next, Jordan's phone was disconnected, social media wiped clean, and their mutual friends had no clue what happened. That disappearance sent Tyler spiraling, not just because of the sudden loss, but because Jordan was the only person who had truly understood his hunger for more. They used to talk about mindset, the law of attraction, morning routines, and how powerful the subconscious mind really is. It wasn't just theory for Jordan, he lived it, practiced it, preached it. And somehow, Jordan's life started changing fast. He'd gone from working a dead-end job to landing clients that would make your jaw drop. He used to say things like, "What you think about, you bring about," and Tyler used to roll his eyes. But then it worked, for Jordan. Which only made his disappearance that much more chilling. Was it burnout? Was he hiding something? Or did he discover something so powerful, he couldn't share it? Tyler couldn't shake the feeling that Jordan had stumbled upon something deeper, something more than vision boards and positive affirmations. And the strangest part? Right before he vanished, Jordan left behind one cryptic note, stuffed inside a worn-out copy of Think and Grow Rich, which Tyler found weeks later while moving boxes in his closet. It read, "It's not about the grind. It's about what you allow your mind to believe. I found the pattern. But you have to unlearn everything first." That was it. No signature, no explanation. Tyler read it over and over, trying to decode its meaning, wondering if it was a warning, a clue, or a confession. Since then, weird things have been happening. Tyler started noticing repeated numbers 1111, 444, 222 on clocks, receipts, license plates. He would hear strangers saying lines that echoed his own thoughts, almost like the universe was eavesdropping. At first, he brushed it off. Coincidence. But the pattern kept showing up, and it was always linked to moments of doubt, fear, or deep reflection. The more he tried to ignore it, the louder it got. And then came the emails. Anonymous tips, articles about mindset hacks, and links to obscure YouTube channels with names like Reprogram Your Reality and Neuroshift Underground. Some were pure clickbait, filled with promises of instant wealth or guaranteed confidence. But others hit different. They spoke about neural rewiring, belief loops, and the science of manifestation in ways that felt too specific to be random. One video, in particular, caught Tyler off guard. It was only a few minutes long, poorly edited, but the voice on the video said, "If you're watching this, it means someone close to you has discovered the truth and gone silent. But you were chosen to continue the work. To succeed, you must forget everything you've been told about what's real." That line sent chills down his spine. Tyler wasn't sure if it was some elaborate prank or a message meant just for him. Either way, he couldn't unsee it. Something was being revealed, slowly, like pieces of a hidden map he didn't know he'd been following all along. Tyler started journaling, tracking his thoughts, his feelings, his dreams. Patterns began to emerge. The same themes, the same fears, the same moments of clarity. It was like his subconscious was trying to speak louder than his conscious mind would allow. He began questioning everything, his job, his relationships, even his memories. And in doing so, he started noticing who around him was uncomfortable with his changes. His co-workers became distant, subtly mocking his new interest in self-discovery. His girlfriend, Emily, once supportive, now called him obsessed. "You're acting like a conspiracy theorist," she said one night. But Tyler knew it wasn't paranoia. There was something real behind this. Something ancient, maybe. Something powerful enough that people would rather dismiss it than confront it. But the real question still haunts him. What did Jordan find, and why did he disappear right after? Could it be that success isn't just about doing more, but about thinking differently? Could the key to transformation actually lie in dismantling everything he thought was true about achievement, productivity, and self-worth? And if that's the case, what else has he been wrong about? Every day, Tyler gets closer to answers, but with each new insight, more questions rise to the surface. He doesn't know who to trust. Not even himself. Someone, or something, doesn't want him to keep digging. And as the pieces start fitting together in unexpected ways, one thing becomes terrifyingly clear. The truth Jordan discovered might not just transform Tyler's life, it might completely unravel everything he thought was real. And just when Tyler thinks he's getting closer to the source, when he believes he's about to unlock the next level, he receives a strange message, not from a stranger, but from someone he thought he'd never hear from again.